Good morning, everyone. I came across this just now, and 11 hours ago, Joe Biden posted this. I heard it's National Dessert Day. What? I mean, who doesn't like a blizzard, right? And here is Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, and he says, your post doesn't meet our double standards. You're banned until you think like a liberal or a Democrat, I suppose. Here is Andy Stone. Andy Stone is the communications chief, or he's for communications at Facebook. And he says, while I will intentionally not link to the New York Post, I want to be clear that this story is eligible to be fact-checked by Facebook's third-party fact-checking partners. In the meantime, we are reducing its distribution on our platform. This is part of our standard process to reduce the spread of misinformation. We temporarily reduced distribution pending fact-checker review. So it's very interesting that Facebook is silencing the news out of, well, the big bombshell that the New York Post posted yesterday. And here is Sohrab Amiri, and sorry if I've got that wrong. It says, this is a big tech information coup. This is a digital civil war. I, an editor at the New York Post, one of the nation's largest papers by circulation, can't post one of our own stories that details corruption by a major party presidential candidate, Joe Biden. And he's got a picture of Twitter saying this is not sent. So Facebook and Twitter are silencing your ability to communicate about this massive, massive bombshell. And actually, yesterday, a friend of mine and me were discussing it over Facebook Messenger, and he was trying to send me a link, and Facebook Messenger popped up that this link violates the community standards and therefore won't be sent. And like earlier in the day, I sent him a picture that at the top of my Facebook Messenger thing had a little bubble. Now, I don't use Facebook Messenger for most people, but there are a few people who refuse to move over. Usually I use a private messenger, but Facebook Messenger is part of a lot of people's everyday life, right? So, but understand that they scan what you write to people and they shape it, meaning they don't let you send certain links, and they sell you advertising based on it, right? And if you've got audio enabled to like record audio, then it records audio. And if you talk about like needing a contractor or something like that, you'll get those kind of ads in your feed, right? Or on the sidebar or wherever the ads show. So is this what you want, right? Google is able, and this was a testimony for Ted Cruz asked the question of one of the Google execs, and I can't remember his name, but he said that Google had a between 5 and 10%, ability to change or move a vote, right? That's a massive, massive ability to change a vote just based on whatever search results are shown, right? And think about what Facebook owns just across its platform. Never mind Twitter, never mind Google. Facebook owns Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Facebook itself, and a whole bunch of other apps as well. And those are massive apps, right? Like those are on most people's phones, right? So the reason I'm talking about this is because this impacts, this is an American example. The Biden story is being silenced by the biggest public squares in history, I think. And that's notable, but it's also happening across the world because Twitter and Facebook are allowed to get away with it in the United States. They're definitely doing it in other countries, right? And they're definitely doing it at the behest of governments of other countries, right? So, man, that's very interesting. Or powerful people, right? Governments, shadow governments, whoever. Somebody is saying this is not okay, right? And I mean, who gets to decide? What meets the criteria, right? Like when you're a public square like that, who gets to make that decision, right? Should they be able to silence a big story like this, regardless of its ability or whether it's true or not? And I think that usually newspapers have a high bar for putting out truthful news. So, I mean, again, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but it should be you that gets to make up your mind, right? You that gets to read it and go, that's weird. You that gets to see the picture and compare it yourself, right? If you don't think it's Hunter Biden, fine, that's great. If you do, okay, then that informs your vote. And the same stuff is happening here in Canada. So let's get into the Canadian news, or more hard Canadian news. Robin Urbach says, proroguing Parliament over the summer worked exactly as designed. It killed the momentum of the We scandal at its apex and teed up the Liberals to now claim that we have more important things to talk about, expert level grubby politics. Yeah, I really think they were playing chess, and they played that right. And I said at the time, they're playing for power, they're playing to win, and look where we're at, right? The NDP are quite happy in their balance of power, propping up a Liberal government that is willing to blame the Harper conservatives despite their own shortfallings. And we'll get into what the shortfallings are. But here's a question for Trudeau and an answer. And sorry, yes, we're going to listen to it because it's important. But he dodges it and blames Harper, right? It's definitely Stephen Harper's fault, except for the fact that Justin Trudeau was the one who in 2019, or the PMO, or somebody refocused the agency that was focused on monitoring for international pandemics and giving advice even to the WHO, an agency that a lot of people respected and liked historically. They were fast movers and able to give early warnings, and Justin Trudeau turned them to looking at vaping in Canada. Right? Instead of, and told them to stop using public signals, so posts on social media, posts on Facebook, et cetera, and use more official signals, right? So they weren't allowed to use the public signals. They had to use the official communications as more important, more true, right? Like, this is more true than this stuff we found on social media because it was on social media. So Trudeau did that. His cabinet did that recently. And yet, here's the question and answer. Here we go.
The Agency of Canada was destined for serious problems unless changes were made to oversight, and yet 2 top doctors told the Globe that those concerns were ignored. Prime Minister, what is your response to this?
We all knew that under the previous conservative government, there were massive cuts to science. There was marginalization of scientific voices. There was a putting aside of experts in an attempt to cut the budget, cut the deficit at all costs on the backs of Canadians. We made historic investments in science. We've worked to restore many of the cuts made to our institutions over 10 long years.
It's a stump speech. They said, basically, the question gave him the topic, and then he started talking about basically the stump speech. An election-style speech talks about what they did, what they accomplished, and throws the Harper conservatives under the bus. And, I mean, who's going to challenge him? But the fact is, I mean, there are a lot of people challenging him. Hold on, there's one other I wanted to show. Here's Andrew Lawton, and he says, when you've been in office for 5 years, you don't get to blame the guy before you if you haven't done anything to change what you claim they did so poorly. And I mean, the fact is, he just made it worse, right? Like, Trudeau just made it worse. Here's Dan Albus. It says, in fact, as reported by the Globe and Mail, it was Trudeau's government's decision last year to kneecap the agency specifically created to give Canadians early warnings about pandemics. There's the Globe or the Toronto Sun story about this. With Trudeau, it's always somebody else's fault. It says, it's the same thing he did during the Aga Khan and SNC-Lavalin conflict of interest scandal. It's also a consistent pattern he exhibits whenever confronted by controversy. With Trudeau, it's always somebody else's fault. I scroll down. In fact, Trudeau had dismissed criticism of his own government's many failures during the pandemic, including downplaying the severity of the crisis until mid-March and ignoring years of warnings by pandemic experts on the need to stockpile personal protective equipment by arguing now is not the time to address them. Of course, when it does come time to address them, Trudeau will argue the opposition parties are politicking while he's trying to save the economy. True to form, on Tuesday, Trudeau blamed the Harper government for failures at the Public Health Agency of Canada during the pandemic. In fact, as reported by the Globe and Mail, it was the Trudeau government's decision last year to kneecap the agency specifically created to give Canadians early warnings about pandemics, the Global Public Health Intelligence Network, that was one of the reasons for the government's slow response to COVID-19. This pattern of refusing to accept responsibility for his actions repeats itself over and over again with Trudeau. Yes, it does. Here is Jagmeet Singh moving into other federal leaders. A prime day reminder that Jeff Bezos is a prime example of a pandemic profiteer. He has increased his worth by an excess of $97 billion on the backs of workers and Canadians, all while Justin Trudeau has allowed Amazon to pay zero in taxes. It's time the ultra-rich pay their fair share. So he wants to tax, like, specifically Jeff Bezos? How long will his $97 billion run Canada for? Like, that won't even cover the debt. Right? Like, the debt is $1 trillion, Jagmeet. Do you understand that? I wonder if he, like it's frustrating that he's trying to create, I drew circles before and there were 3. And basically he's trying to dodge the ire of the taxpayer by blaming the other guy. Here's the bag, Jeff Bezos, you billionaire, you. It's your fault that we're in debt and we need all this money and you're going to pay for it. Right? Like, this is not leadership. I think he's playing Trudeau's game even more than Trudeau is, right? Like, Trudeau's just unleashing Jagmeet to be, I don't know, like, is this too far left? Is this for even Canadians? Is this gone too far? Or are people getting on board with the vilify the billionaires and ignore the absolute rampant spending of the elite political class. You know, is that what's going on here? Moving into the Conservative leader of the opposition, O'Toole is resuming in-person fundraising events after COVID-19 rally. Oh, he'd do a Trump rally if people would show up, right? I think he would. No, he wouldn't. I don't trust Aaron O'Toole. It's frustrating because I was hoping for a good leader. I think Leslie Lewis would have had a better chance of beating Trudeau. But you know, there's nothing about the Conservative Party that gives me any kind of excitement, except maybe their ability to put a call to action at the end of their videos now. Good job, Conservatives. Improvement, right? Just however slight. It's a little bit of improvement. It's just frustrating. It's just frustrating to watch the mismanagement across the federal level, right? Like there's nobody, like this is the news. Why aren't you holding Trudeau accountable for anything, right? Like why aren't you making hay out of the political missteps that he's been consistently giving you? Garbage. Yesterday, I made some news, which I thought was kind of funny. There was a phone town hall, and here's Guelph Mercury Tribune reporting on it. It's a fair report by Graham McNaughton, so thank you for that, Graham. It says, I don't want to ever go there again. Guelph mayor says residents need to maintain COVID-19 precautions to avoid more cases. It says, this is Cam Guthrie's opening remarks. He says, we managed to really flatten the curve during the first wave, and I just know that we can continue to keep that down as we are in the second wave. There was also at least one question on when things would go back to normal when Mark Peralvis, candidate for the People's Party of Canada in Guelph, in last year's federal election, pointing to a lower number of deaths in Ontario during the second wave. When do we respond to the fact that maybe a second wave of cases is happening, but this is not nearly as impactful or as deadly as the first wave, he asked. The businesses being closed is not an effect of the virus, it's an effect of the government's reaction. In response, Longfield pointed to the need to avoid the overloading of the healthcare system, as that space will be needed should the virus spread to more vulnerable populations. The concern is that will spread into the community, into elderly people, or to people that are vulnerable to the disease to the point where they have to be hospitalized, he said. Having the strain on the healthcare system, you missed a word, Graham, has been one of the big concerns from the start. And because of the exponential growth, if we do get a load on the healthcare system, it's going to be a big load in a hurry. So we're shutting down major places in Ontario. Back to this. According to data released last month by the province, people aged 20 to 39 make up the largest share of new COVID-19 diagnosis in September. However, all other age groups were beginning to tick upwards as well. Schreiner said, unlike the early days of the pandemic, closures to tide the spread of the virus have become more targeted, pointing to the province's recently imposed restrictions in the hotspots of Toronto, Ottawa, and Peel region. The economic devastation and the mental health crisis that's coming out of that is very debilitating, as COVID is. So is trying to balance all of that, the provincial Green Party leader said, pointing to those measures. This isn't a blanket lockdown, it's strategic, Guthrie added. And that's why we need to, in Guelph, continue the things we're doing, because I don't want to be a mayor that stands in front of a camera and says, oh, we have to go do what the province says and lock down our whole city again. I don't want to go there ever again. I've got a video coming out about this. This is a fair report, but there was a lot more to the answers. The answers were not answers. I wasn't able to interact with them. After you ask your question, you're cut off and they answer the question, so all you get is one and no follow-up, which is fine. It was okay, but my question was a little bit more targeted. I've got more to say on that, and I won't take up the time here, so watch for that video. It'll be out later today. Here is Jerry Auger. And Jerry is a reporter in Toronto News Talk 1010, and he says, for $278,000 and 4 months of work by outside consultants, the City of Toronto got 83 recommendations amounting to a list of what the city does. 2 inside workers could have done that over beers on a Saturday. And here is the official report from another reporter, a senior journalist for City News, and he says, City Manager Chris Murray released his report on Toronto's recovery plans this morning. It says another $1.5 billion in revenue losses are expected in 2021 due to the pandemic. Among 83 recommendations offered as part of the report, an emphasis was put on helping racialized and equity-seeking communities in the city. So not only did this report cost $278,000 and took 4 months of work, but that report that cost that much money is saying that $1.5 billion in revenue losses are going to be expected. I think that the overreaction to this virus is worse, much worse than the actual virus. And it's incredible what people are allowing to happen because it's happening so incrementally, right? And nobody's even asking, what are the criteria to repeal the mandatory masks? When? When can we repeal it? What do you want? 0 deaths? That's not going to happen, especially when you look at, okay, hold on, we'll do this. Especially when you look at things like this. The other day I reported on this, Kate, this chart. Do you remember this, right? And I went to the other in a month of flu season from August until September 23rd, August 21st to September 23rd. There were 6. That represents this number of 6, and I was like, that's crazy. I wonder what comparative years were. And I just looked at 2018, and 2018 had 21 flu confirmed through just 2 weeks, from October 23rd to, or maybe 3 weeks, October 23rd to September 7th. So I said, well, this is like very low, right? There's not even 20. So this is very low. 6 is like a week. They changed it to exceptionally low levels with a link, right? Isn't that incredible? Like, that's just crazy. And it's not crazy. I'm not surprised by this, but the brazenness with which they're just erasing things. They took 100 years of climate data, just gone, poof, right? So how are you supposed to even know? We're not supposed to know. That's the point, right? We're not supposed to question it. We're not supposed to be the ne'er-do-well. The fact that I made news as a person who asked about when do we go back to normal, like that's news. That's news. It's unbelievable, right? And we're never going to know because they're not going to tell us, right? This isn't that little flu. We've beaten the flu. Yay! Right? No, you're not here. You're not seeing that headline. Financial Post, Trudeau plans to keep borders closed until COVID-19 cases drop. So what's the goal? What's the criteria, right? Drop to 0. Let's eradicate the disease. It must be gone. No, I mean, this is wrong-headed and stupid and not the way that we have done this historically. What else are they locking down? Here's a very, very scary one. I'm expecting to do more on this. I'm watching for this. Lucas Myers is reporting, and he's a News Talk 1010 reporter too. I'm going to follow him. He's reporting, effective Friday, short-term or temporary absences for social or personal reasons will not be allowed at long-term care in Ottawa, Peel, and Toronto. Only absences for medical or compassionate reasons will be allowed. So, sorry, you're not allowed to leave for the day. Sorry, but you're locked in here. That's it. Have you read the reports out of the long-term care facilities? Why are we imprisoning our elderly? Why is they don't even have an ability to appeal? There's no what is it? Bail court? There's no parole committee, right? Like, you can't say, listen, I know I'm getting older and stuff, and I've got my room here, but I'd like to really go out for dinner or something. I'd really like to go see my family. No day passes, right? What's compassionate care? And here's Bree from out east. She says Moncton is back in the orange phase, which means no hockey unless you're an Irving Oil hockey player. Then you're exempt. I guess COVID can now distinguish between local and corporate teams. That sneaky virus. I was at the Zayres yesterday and I noticed that they've got, instead of the arrows in the aisles, they've got just keep your distance. Because I was making fun of it the other day, saying this is the only virus that understands if you're passing somebody from like walking the same direction or if you're going the other way, right? Like, it knows it's going to get you. But yeah, they took that off and now it just says keep your distance, which is ridiculous because is a grocery store aisle 6 feet wide? Could you possibly keep 6 foot distance around you? It's wrong-headed. So is this. Here's the get up for if you want to serve drinks at a restaurant. Don't wear glasses. You do now. So you have to wear goggles, right? Goggles is going to protect you, except see all that space around your eyes? If you wore this get up into a clean room or into like a place where, like, say you were working with Ebola, or like, remember that movie Outbreak with the monkey, and say the person had a cut. Oh, maybe she was jabbed with a needle. That would be much worse than just being in a clean room with this. But even so, I think people going into the clean room without the proper get up is exactly the same as walking around believing this protects you. Protects you from what? It makes it much more likely you're going to fall downstairs or walk into something. Like, this it's almost parody, right? Like, this is not a mad TV sketch, right? But it seems like it is a mad TV sketch, just like this. Right? Seriously? Really, Joe Biden? But I wish this wasn't the leader's solution, because this is ridiculous, right? We're going to save everybody's economy. Don't worry. Order out, and we're going to make the servers wear this. Yes, go to work, everyone, please. Trust us. We know what we're doing. Sure. here's more leaders behaving just so ridiculously. Do you remember the sketch? I remember the sketch. I liked Colbert when he was funny, back when it was the Colbert Report, not the Late Show. And do you remember when he would just say, I don't see color, I'm not racist, and I know that you're white because blah, 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 right? Because whatever. And it would be funny, and we'd all laugh. Here is an actual Canadian politician, not joking about this. Laurie Goldstein says, a white Canadian premier claiming I don't see color is absurd. White politicians are obsessed with color. Be honest and admit it instead of a cliche-ridden virtue signaling. Horgan says he misspoke at debate about white privilege, regrets alienating people. I bet he regrets alienating people. Here's alienating more people. Here we go.
I certainly mischaracterized the challenges that people of color face every day. I was reflecting on my childhood, which is how I interpreted the question, and I was inappropriate to say I don't see color. I don't have a clue as a white person the challenges that people of color face every day. That was a mistake on my part. I have to work every day to improve on that, as do all leaders that aren't of color.
So, I think everybody has struggles. I think everybody has challenges. And I think making it about your skin color is stupid. I think it's wrong-headed. And I think it's the wrong direction for the country. And I think leaders kowtowing to it should be removed from office, right? If you can't understand that everybody has challenges, then, man, you really shouldn't be in office, right? And regardless of their skin color, sure, everybody has challenges. But if you want to reduce challenges down to you have challenges because of your skin color, and I couldn't possibly understand that because of my skin color, that's racist, sir. You moron. Like, really? Seriously, did you think about this at all? Idiot. So he misspoke and about white privilege and regrets alienating people. The true part of this headline is he regrets alienating people and he wishes that he could pull his foot out of his mouth. But the way to do that is to just speak truth and say, this is stupid. You're all stupid for demanding it. And we should talk about politics, policy, and not reduce it to race and groups and skin color. That is wrong-headed and the wrong direction. And the press is irresponsible for reporting things in that lens. And the people who are demanding it are not demanding it in good faith. They don't want to fix problems. They want to divide. Call it out for what it is. And yes, call it stupid because it's stupid. Here's President Macron, and he's declaring a curfew to be imposed in numerous French cities. Nice is exempt. I thought that was interesting. Somebody was making a point that was somehow politically important. I'm not sure why it's politically important. I just thought I'd mention it. But to me, it correlates with the restrictions on hockey and only allowing the Irving Oil team to play during COVID restrictions. Because, they're exempt because they've got to, right? The virus knows these guys have to do that. The virus knows you're walking the other way down the aisle. It's going to get you, right? It knows that Patrick Brown likes to play hockey, so it leaves him be. And it'll get other people in Mississauga or Brampton, right, Mr. Brown? Right? Like Mr. Menzies, who's waiting at the hockey arena, not playing hockey just to see who you're playing hockey with, right? The virus knows. The virus knows. Just like it knows that if you're in a restaurant, you can not have a mask on if you're sitting down. And if you're on a plane sitting right beside somebody, if you're not wearing a mask, the virus is going to get you. Unless you're eating, right? Because you couldn't wear a mask and eat. Have you seen the pictures of the people at restaurants wearing a mask eating? It's terrifying. It's like watching Muppets eat, and it looks like it's a parody. Like, you're not. It's not smart. You're not helping. You're hurting yourself. Stop it. Here's WestJet. WestJet will soon no longer fly to Moncton, Fredericton, Sydney, Charlottetown, and Quebec City, and drastically cut back service to St. John's and Halifax. The problem with this is, the Atlantic bubble is not helping. Don't we have freedom of movement in Canada? I'm sure that we want to keep people safe and stuff, but I say again, smartest virus ever, right? There are still international travelers landing in Atlantic Canada, as far as I know, foreign workers and all sorts of other people. So, the cases in the second wave and the deaths in the second wave, I'm going to do a whole video on it, but it does not necessitate all of these draconian lockdowns. I don't understand why it's being so I do understand why it's being so accepted by the public, because the press is pushing it, but I don't understand why more people aren't standing up and saying this is bunk. You're obviously ignoring these really obvious things that you should be talking about, and you're not, right? People just don't even ask questions about it. It's incredible. Here's a bit of spending news. This one's economy, right? This one's economy, and this is purposeful destruction, right? If the Atlantic bubble stays closed, people can't travel to that part of the country, and airline, either tickets, expenses, prices go up, or people just stop going there, right? And both of those things happen. And, like I usually go out east every summer, and we didn't go this year because we couldn't go. So I hope this gets better. This isn't better. This isn't a more free Canada. And the data that they're using to justify it is bunk. Blacklock's reporter, this is bad spending of our tax dollars. Trying to lower my blood pressure after reading this headline. Listen to pan flute music for a minute, but it didn't work. Don't want to use expletives. Blood pressure is pretty high right now. Rideau Hall spent $110,000 on legal fees in response to bullying and harassment claims. Rideau Hall is where the Governor General goes, and all of the news articles talking about how she's awful and terrible to work for and with, et cetera, et cetera. Last story for this morning. Is that a good use of taxpayer dollars? No. Is it? I mean, there hasn't been a good use of taxpayer dollars, really, that these liberals can preside over and point to and say, we were very successful there. Even all the curb stuff, a lot of it was targeted poorly, and they admit the errors were made because of speed, etc. But this points to more incompetence, more inability to appoint the correct people to run our country, more inability to answer simple questions, right? More inability to, they admit that the deaths aren't there, but they're worried about a surge. Well, I mean, the surge didn't happen. It's incredibly irresponsible. Anyway, moving into the last story of the day. Global News is reporting coronavirus G20 suspends debt payments to most vulnerable nations for 6 months. The group of 20 nations representing the world's biggest economies agreed Wednesday to extend the suspension of debt payments by an additional 6 months to support the most vulnerable countries in their fight against the coronavirus pandemic. The suspension of what the G20 says could provide relief of $14 billion in debt payments that had been due to expire at the end of the year. Wednesday's decision gives developing nations until the end of June 2021 to focus spending on healthcare and emergency stimulus programs rather than debt repayments. The G20 announcement was made initially on Twitter during a meeting of the group's finance ministers and central bank governors, and later confirmed at a news conference. The virtual discussions are being held at the start of this week's meetings of 189 nation International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which are also being conducted virtually because of the coronavirus pandemic. We still need to do more, Mohammed Al-Jadaan, the finance minister for Saudi Arabia, this year's chair of the G20, said in a news conference after the meeting. We must ensure these nations are fully supported in their efforts to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic. We have agreed to extend the debt service suspension initiative by 6 months. I think this is continued. I think this is all part of the same plan. And, all of these systems that are built up to make decisions, the macro level decisions that, we elect these people and the people in charge put these people in positions to make these decisions, right? I don't trust them. Why don't I trust them? Because this, right? $110,000 on bullying harassment claims, right? And the Joe Biden stuff, and the fact that it's all of these levels of government seem to be all in agreement. And that's hard, right? Because data will be interpreted and looked at, and conclusions drawn from different levels of government, because each one has different things, they have different lenses they have to come at it from. So when everybody says, yep, this is 100% definitely true, we've got to do this, and we've got to do this, and we've got to do this, and blah, 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 it makes me think, what the heck is going on here? And I know what's going on here, right? This ties right back to this guy, right? I can see it all, because the censorship leads to a more coordinated response from the leadership, and the messaging necessarily needs to be the same. And so I understand why it's happening. I just disagree with this style of leadership. I disagree because the data leads me to come to a different conclusion than all of these three are pushing. And that's concerning, because the data is public and these guys can't justify their responses. Right? And I'm using these guys as stand-ins for your local representatives too. They just happen to be mine. But when you ask a question like, the deaths are really low and the cases are really high, and maybe that's explained by the 800% increase in cases, and they say, yeah, but what if there is a surge? And they're pushing the same fear message that the media is pushing, instead of addressing the actual issue of, we're going into wintertime, and pretending that ordering food to sit on a patio is a good idea to help restaurants is stupid. Sorry, guys, but it just is. any restaurateur worth their salt, if you own an expensive restaurant, are you going to want to serve your expensive restaurant's food on a frozen patio and hope your customers don't get sick because they're sitting outside eating in the freezing cold? You can't have a high-end restaurant experience when it's snowing, when it's minus 15 and snowing outside. It's just not possible. And I say again, the whole point of this is we want a viable response from all levels of government. But again, the people that are being put in charge, the people who are currently in charge, either elected or the bureaucrats who've been appointed, are making decisions, and their decisions are not justifiable when you look at the data. And when you ask them about it, they won't answer. So why is the same story from every level? It just makes my brain tickle, right? There's something going on. And this is the same mirror. Right? The G20 is the same mirror, just on the other side, right? Like the people who the government appoints to these positions, they're the wrong people. It's like Donald Trump begging to have anybody but Chrystia Freeland finish the negotiations for the USMCA. We lost on that. We lost big on that. And instead of actually putting somebody in place who's, competent, then they promoted her to finance minister, they ignored Trump, and we lost. Canadians lose, and we're going to continue to lose in just the same way that Obama's economy lost, in just the same way that Americans lost when Obama was in charge. And it's unfortunate. So that's what I mean when I say it all ties back to this. Maybe I overused that. Maybe that was one too many. But man, he's running for president. I think a tissue. I think a wet tissue could beat him in a debate, right? And he did better against Trump than I thought. But I'm pretty sure he had an earpiece. Okay, that's enough out of me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. 31 minutes, seriously? I'm still going to do the other Guelph videos, so watch for that. I'll put it on my private channel and on my Canada Poly as well. So thanks for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.